Well, this is a great start to today's walk. Many happy memories of drinking in the Sir Richard Steele. That's a fine North London pub. It gives us a hint of what awaits further down the hill. So yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take you for a walk around Camden Town. Famous for its market, its incredible musical heritage, and of course, Widnell and I mean, that's what you're all thinking, right? This is a video about Widnell and I. And of course, like anyone who spent a certain amount of time living in London, I've got a degree of personal heritage connected with Camden Town. I mean, who hasn't, after all, let's be honest. Even if you only came to the market once when you're on holiday, there's some connection to it. So there'll be a bit of a sprinkling of that in there. And I'll say up the front here, I mean, there's so much you can say about Camden Town. Obviously, I won't be covering everything. This will be highly idiosyncratic and slightly subjective and personal to a degree in terms of what I include and what I exclude. But what I will say is I look forward to reading your comments below. I think this will be a video with some of the best comments of any video that I've made. I think there'll be lots of memories being shared of crazy nights out and jobs that people have done here, characters that they've known. I mean, you could write not just one book about Camden, you could write several volumes of books about Camden if you want to record all the kind of characters and memories and stuff. And of course, we'll be covering the more traditional histories as well. We can't leave that out. Camden's got some great history. Chalk Farm Underground Station. I shall try and put some facts on the screen about Chalk Farms. I didn't actually prepare anything. I know the Jeff Marshall fans amongst you will be disgusted that I can't reel off a load of facts about Chalk Farm Station. But that's just the way it is. It's good to see the Enterprise over there has been saved. Last time I walked past it was all boarded up. That's a classic old pub. Apparently it was a very important folk club in the 1960s. And then, like a lot of the pubs in Camden, it was associated with punk for a period of time. The Marathon Bar, that's another kind of classic Camden Town venue. That is, I mean, that's where nights would end, isn't it, really, at the wee small hours. That was either a measure of a really good night or the mark of a night that had just gone a little bit too far. I think it's 24-hour. Bit of a legendary location. And we're starting here really with probably the real gem of Camden, the generator of a lot of what has gone on here. The Camden Roundhouse, built in 1847 as an engine shed. I think it was used for turning engines as well. There was a big turning table in there that was there for quite a long time after it ceased to have that function. It then became a kind of gin warehouse. I think it was used by Gilbey's Gin. And I think by the 1960s it had become an arts venue. There's an amazing production of Hamlet that was directed by the great Tony Richardson and starring Nicole Williamson. And they did the theatrical production here in the evening, and then after the show they would record it for the film version, which you can watch somewhere. I highly recommend it. And they used the kind of the cellars and the basement to depict Elsinore, the castle of Elsinore. Fantastic. Nicole Williamson as Hamlet is just fantastic. The Roundhouse played a really important role in the development of Camden as being, like, I suppose if you like, the heart of alternative London, hippie London if you like, because it was here in 1967 that there was the Congress of the Dialectics on Liberation, I can't remember, I'll put the proper title up here. And that happened in 1967, and that featured people like Allen Ginsberg came over from the United States along with Stokely Carmichael of the Black Panthers, the radical anti-psychiatrist R.D. Laing spoke here. It was an amazing event. It was filmed by Ian Sinclair for a film called Our Sunflower. And Ian said to me that he reckoned that the market eventually evolved out of that event because a load of people converged here who'd all been on the hippie trail at various points, and they just stayed, and the way they could fund themselves was by selling the things they gathered on their travels. That doesn't quite fit in with the conventional history of the development of Camden Market, but I like that story. It's just a load of people who came for an event here in 1967 and never left. So we're just going to take a little detour into Belmont Street. I used to work in an office down here, but it was only from reading Anne Scanlon's Rock and Roll Guide to Camden this morning in bed that I discovered that the building that I used to work in just here was actually quite a notable location in the reggae scene in London. I think Desmond Dekker had a recording studio here. Also then, naturally, the link with punk is really strong in Camden, so inevitably various members of the Clash were associated with it. I think this is where Joe Strummer mixed the first 101ers album in here. I worked here for a production company in an office up here that we shared with Lee Francis, better known to my British viewers as Keith Lemon. But back then he used to do this quite unusual comedy show called Beau Selector, where he wore these kind of rubber masks of various celebrities. And the room that I worked in, the office just up there, I think it was on the 4th or 5th floor, was just surrounded by these masks that Lee wore on mannequin heads. So it was quite a strange place to work, because whenever you looked up you go, oh, there's Craig David, there's one of the Spice Girls, there's Michael Jackson. It's an unusual place to work. That pub there, now called the Camden Assembly, I'm pretty sure that was called something else. What was that? Someone will definitely know. I can look it up when I go home. Right in the corner of Chalk Farm Road here. It wasn't the Monarch, was it? It was definitely a venue. I remember seeing people queue up there. Right, I'm going to allow myself a detour from Camden High Street down Ferdinand Street. I think this is where one of my favourite bookshops in the entire world is. It's where I got a lot of the resources for my book, This Other London, in this bookshop down here. If it is down here, I'm pretty sure it is. This looks familiar. The fantastic Walden books, and my good pal Nick Papadimitriou, I think, worked in there briefly, I think, and he reckons it's the inspiration for Black Books, the fantastic Dylan Moran sitcom, obviously one of my favourite TV shows ever, and he reckoned that Walden was the inspiration for Black Books. I don't know how true that is. There are other locations that claim the same thing. Harmood Street, not Ferdinand Street, it's in Harmood Street, which is parallel to here, sort of just through there basically, but apparently it's closed according to Google, so maybe we won't go round Harmood Street just to look at the closed Walden books. Great bookshop, go to Walden Books. This was a pub in the past. I can't remember what it was called. It had various names down the years. I think at one point it might have even been a Wetherspoons, but looks like it's sadly closed at the moment. So you can see where we are there. We've got the Stables Market over the road, and we'll cross over there and have a look at that in a second. And then we're going to go down Camden High Street, and we'll go past the World's End, the Electric Ballroom obviously, and then we're going to go off the beaten track slightly towards the end. I know where I want to end the video, but I'll save that as a treat. This place is a bit of a survivor. My Village Cafe. I used to go there for lunch. Actually, they used to do an amazing vegan lunch there. I mean, I had no idea what most of it was, but it was really delicious. It's good to see that it's still alive. And this is a bit of a Camden institution, the Lock Tavern. That was the place I often used to meet friends there in the early 90s, and the Lock Tavern, good place to drink. Not a lot more to say about it really, other than that. I think it's all the pubs in Camden. We could tell you about famous musicians that have drunk in there. I think it would be easier to find the pubs where, you know, Noel Gallagher or Jarvis Cocker or Mick Strummer hasn't had a pint, to be honest with you. I think we have to go and have a look at Walden Books, don't we? Even if they're closed, just to pay homage. Here's Walden Books. Absolutely fantastic bookshop there. A real book lover's paradise. Like I said, I bought so many of the books that I used for research for my book, This Other London. It's a used bookshop, but what they haven't got in there isn't worth reading, to be honest with you. And also they'll get anything that you want as well, so fantastic place. Camden Market. Well, this is actually the stables market here, isn't it? Which is a slightly newer addition, but let's go for a wander around. This has been really done up. I'm not sure I've seen it like this. So this bit here is like an 80s addition to Camden Market. The real Camden Market, the original one, is around the lock. Obviously now it's all been merged into one. So this bit was added in the 80s on the site of a former stables. That's why it's called the Stables Market, pretty obviously. And it was I think the horses that we kept here were part of the railway infrastructure, and I guess part of the whole kind of industrial part of Camden. But this thing here, this is quite recent, all this business. I mean, look, there's a Sports Direct over there, which isn't very Camden, is it? The traders initially opposed this. I remember back when I worked over the road there for a production company. It's probably about 2007, I think, 2008, and there was a big campaign to stop the redevelopment of the stables and the creation of this. So this bit here is called Maker's Alley. It is a little bit like a shopping mall, isn't it? Like an open mall, which is what they feared back then, what, 12, 13 years ago. So in normal times, as in non-COVID times, Camden Market is one of Britain's most popular tourist attractions in the whole country. It's right up there with the Tower of London and Buckingham Palace and the Lake District and all sorts. Approximately 25 million people a year visit Camden Market. I hope it gets back to that level. It's looking like it. Apparently on a busy day in the summer you get as many as 250,000 people passing through just Camden Market, which is incredible, isn't it? It's still the place to come and get if you like street fashion or alternative fashion. Camden Town's is still the place you're going to come shopping. Of course, when you're so busy looking at all the stuff, you forget these beautiful old kind of Victorian industrial buildings here. I think there's a really beautiful irony that a place that was established by hippies in the 1970s became so synonymous with punk and so associated with punk. This is still a place where you can get all the old punk clothing as well as the hippie clothing side by side. Maybe those two tribes are now reconciled here in Camden Market. This amazing food. I used to eat here at lunchtime sometimes. Really beautiful curries. And this is where you got all your foods here. Look, there's falafel over there, which I think is a pretty safe bet in Camden Market. Can't go wrong with the falafel. Also, the pizzas are good here. There's an Italian pizza place here. There's a calzone place, which is amazing. So down here, as we get towards the lock, this is the original Camden Market that was set up in 1972 on the site of an old timber yard. And it was the name of the proprietor of that timber yard who gave its name to one of the most famous venues in Camden Town, Dingwalls. The original yard was called T.E. Dingwalls, and that became the Dingwalls Music Hall. Many acts played there. The list is too numerous, but we'll say The Clash, Blondie, U2, everybody played at Dingwalls at some point in their career. Village Games, that's a bit of a survivor. There's a bookshop over here. I used to buy a lot of books as well. Let's see if it's still here. There it is, yeah. Black Gull. Bought loads of books from here in the past as well. I'm going to have to go in for a bit of a look, I think. Oh, a bit of Terry Pratchett. Burroughs. Oh, look. This is going to surprise some of you, but I've never read any Terry Pratchett. I remember picking up a Discworld book in the 80s when I was reading a lot of fantasy. And I didn't know that Pratchett was from the same part of the world as me. He was from Hotspur, the village next to Woburn, or just above Woburn. So I really want to read some Pratchett, but I don't know where to start because there's so many books. I think the first Discworld novel is a good place to start, isn't it? I kind of just want to go and sit in a pub garden and read these now. A couple of Pratchetts. I'm diving in. This is my introduction to Terry Pratchett. Expect references to litter future videos. A lot more street food here. We've got the Yorkshire burrito over there. I kid you not, the Yorkshire burrito. And here is the actual Camden Lock on the Regent's Canal here. And it was the building of the canal that really made this suburb boom. Can't believe we got all this way, down to the market, round the market, been to the Roundhouse, been to lots of other places, and I've not spoken yet about where Camden comes from, where the name comes from, how the suburb developed. So we'll have to do that now as we work our way along the canal. There was a kind of scattering of cottages here in the mid-18th century around the Mother Redcap pub, which we will visit one of the Mother Redcaps soon. And that's how the suburb developed. It really boomed in the late 17th century, around I think it was around 1790 when it started to really develop, and then that kicked on with the building of the Regent's Canal, and then after that the coming of the railways, and that's when Camden really took off. What's interesting is the name comes from, kind of predictably, the Earl of Camden, but actually his estate was down in Chislehurst, and he bought it from William Camden, the great historian and sometime topographer. So that's interesting. Camden's named after a bloke called Camden. There's the market hall there. Again, I think that's another 80s edition. So this bridge here over the canal was always a favourite haunt of the Camden drug dealers. It was like running the gauntlet here, getting past those blokes. It's quite funny. This branch of Starbucks here occupies the old lockkeeper's cottage. And there we have the Dingwalls building, site of the legendary music venue. This is a bit of classic Camden Town now. Look at this. T-shirts, boots, sweatshirts, a bit of vintage. Over here was one of London's most famous and notable radical bookshops, Compendium Books. So over there, the shop with no name, with lots of sort of studded belts, that was the original home of Compendium Books, which opened in the late 60s, around the time of the Congress of the Dialectics of Liberation. And then the shop moved along here to 234, and it was a really key place in terms of alternative London, in terms of where people got ideas from. It's quite legendary actually, because in terms of what I do today, because it's here that Ian Sinclair used to sell his self-published books here. This is where he discovered the newsletters of the London Psychogeographical Association, and he started adopting that terminology. Ian did readings there and all sorts. It's a really key location in the history of London. I think it closed in the year 2000. If you read Anne Scanlon's book, pretty much every building along Camden High Street and Chalk Farm Road and Kentish Town Road has a story to tell, has played some sort of role in the development of the music scene in Camden and in Britain generally. It's claimed in her book that Camden has more music venues, or had more music venues, than anywhere else in Europe, if not in the world. It's a bit of a bold claim really. I think there's a few places in the United States might disagree with that. But there certainly were at one point, at the point that Anne Scanlon wrote her book, which I think is the mid-90s, was a real massive cluster of venues. All these pubs around here pretty much hosted some type of entertainment, either live music or theatre or comedy. Sadly now, I don't know if that's still the case. The Oxford Arms there, it's a sort of mid-Victorian pub. It was home to the Etc. Theatre. It was a lovely little venue. It's where another place where Russell Brand used to perform his decidedly avant-garde stand-up comedy. The Elephant's Head pub sadly looks as though it's closed now, but according to Anne Scanlon's book, this is where Marlon Brando went for a pint once. Oh, some good news. Actually, the pub is reopening on Monday, May the 17th. They've given the old MTV studios a bit of a facelift. This was originally a brewery, and it became quite an iconic location in North London, the old MTV studios. A lot of careers were made there. Probably a lot of careers were ended there as well. I wonder how many people had their first tattoo or piercing in Camden Town. Buck's Head pub over there. Went there a few times. My friend actually used to work at MTV. That was kind of her favourite pub. That's where we used to drink. The wonderful Kate O'Driscoll. And the Camden Falcon is around here somewhere, isn't it? That was an amazing venue, the Falcon. Saw some great gigs there. I saw some slightly unusual gigs there. Stereo Lab was particularly good. I think they were supported by a band called Pram, who are incredibly unusual, but still, I think to this day, have a very dedicated following. It's funny how the mental map plays tricks on you. The Falcon's quite away from here, sort of over near Camden Road, so I'm not going to take that detour for now. It's going to start raining any minute, and we've still got a load of places to visit. So here it is, the legendary Electric Ballroom. This was like a really classic goth venue for a long time. I think it's Sisters of Mercy played here. I think the Mission might have even played their very first gig here, but what a great place. Bowie had played there as well. Started life though apparently as an Irish dance hall. I'm not sure what its fate is now. I don't think it's a nightclub anymore. Maybe it is. I hope I'm wrong there. Inverness Street Market. I mean, you could say actually in reality this is the original Camden Market before the hippie market. It was set up in the 1970s. This market's been here for quite some time. It's also a really good place to get street food. Down here, there's a couple of places down here we definitely have to go and have a look at. Out on the floor records there, made in Brazil. There's a place down there called Taipan Alley. Nice musical reference. I hope Mega City Comics is just closed because it's a bank holiday. That's where I started to try to replenish some of my 2000 AD collection. And the Good Mixer, one of the more better known musically associated pubs in Camden, not for being a venue but for the people who drank there. It was kind of one of the favourite pubs of the Britpop crowd. Yeah, not a great pub actually in the days that I went there in the sort of late 90s, but there you go. I always felt the Good Mixer was one of those pubs that couldn't quite live up to its reputation. I can't remember when I went there. It might have been the early 90s, it might have been slightly at the later 90s. But I had friends who were in bands and stuff, and I remember going there with one of them once, or a group of us. I think we'd been to a gig and we went to the Good Mixer, and they went, "Oh, this is the place where everyone goes." And true enough, you were playing pool against, I don't know, various Britpop luminaries. But not a great pub then. It was quite sort of just not a very nice pub at all compared to some of the other pubs in Camden. I think I probably only went there twice and then stuck to my old favourites, you know. So we've got a few more places to go. This whistle-stop tour of Camden Town, which I imagine isn't going to be quite so whistle-stop in terms of the duration of the video, but trust me, we're just skimming across the surface here. Camden Town Tube Station, built on the site of an old workhouse. It's one of those kind of classic places where people meet up in London, isn't it? You get the buskers here. Those people do bits of filming out here. There's someone busking over there right now, ruining the audio on my VO. But yeah, just a truly iconic London location, really. And this is another place I'm sure many of you have ended up at far too late in the morning. First choice, queuing up for a misguided kebab. The British Boot Company. This is a great shop. Fantastic place to buy your DMs. The 40th anniversary of Madness. The Princeton. Well, that tees up one of our next locations. Not quite next. We'll go down to the Camden Palace and then we'll loop back and we'll go past the Dublin Castle. How about that? The World's End pub. Previously the Mother Redcap, which this area was simply known as at once upon a time as the Mother Redcap before it was called Camden Town in the late 18th century. Apparently the World's End was a favourite drinking spot of Charles Dickens. He was a regular in there. He had a second home in Camden. And here also is the Underworld nightclub and music venue. Again, the roll call bands that have played there is a who's who of kind of rock and pop of the last 40 years. And this road here, Camden High Street, going up to Chalk Farm Road, was an old coaching road that links central London to Highgate and Hampstead. So the World's End was originally known as the Mother Redcap, and that's a name you see a lot, the Mother Redcap. There was a Mother Redcap pub near where I grew up on the A40, and there's two popular associations with the name of the Mother Redcap. One is more prosaically, it was the name for an alewife, a woman who brewed beer, and the place where she sold that beer became known as the Mother Redcap. The other one that people tend to latch onto more is an association with witchcraft. That Mother Redcap was a name for a witch, and there is a legend connected to a witch that's supposed to have lived on this crossroads here that then became the name of the pub here, the Mother Redcap. And over the road behind me here is the Black Cap, which is another name associated with witchcraft. I'm not sure which came first though. I'm not sure if the name of the pub came before the legend about the witch. It may be that people assumed there must have been a witch living here if there had been a pub called the Mother Redcap. I could be completely wrong. You can find that story online though. Camden changes quite a lot. Once you cross over there at the tube station and you're walking away from the market, you don't get the tourists down here. It's a lot more kind of work a day, a lot more kind of rough and ready. But it provides us with a couple more of our key locations. And here's the Camden Head, home of the Camden Comedy Club, which I massively recommend. It is run by my old pal Ivor Dembina. I actually filmed one of his gigs in there in January 2020. It's a cracking night out in there. Ivor runs really, really good comedy clubs. He's one of the old legends of the London alternative comedy scene. He's been around forever and everyone's played his clubs over the years. He's a very funny guy himself and I highly recommend his club. Here it is, a legendary venue, the old Camden Palace. Changed its name to Koko a couple of years ago, and you can see like the London Fire Brigade kind of sign up there because there was a really bad fire here in January 2020. I've decided to do my my little piece here where all the pigeons like to sit, and they're not going to move for me. Camden Palace was built in 1900 as a theatre, and I think it had quite an illustrious early life. After the Second World War, the BBC took the theatre over and used it for radio recordings initially. It's where some of the Goon shows were recorded. It's where the very first Monty Python album was recorded, which that alone should have it preserved for all eternity. But it's in the early 80s. It was became a real kind of key venue in the burgeoning new romantic scene. Steve Strange from Visage used to do a night there on a Tuesday night called Feet First. It's where Madonna did her first UK performance, and it's to Feet First that I used to come on a Tuesday with my mates when I was a student. It was £1 to get in if you had a flyer, a quid, and there was always a really good band playing as well. It was just a brilliant night out. It was a brilliant night. There'd be all sorts of people from bands there in the crowd. There'd be like stand-ups that you recognise from the telly there. It was an amazing place. I realise I've made a bit of a tactical error, and there's a couple of, I've got to walk back up Camden High Street for a couple of key locations. We've got to go to the Dublin Castle, otherwise no one will ever forgive me. And also we should go to the Jewish Museum, although I doubt it's open. It can't be open yet, but we can sit from the outside. And there's one other place I want to end this walk, not technically in Camden Town, but I think it's worthy of inclusion. I'm not sure why, but it's this area around Mornington Crescent that I associate with the painter Walter Sickert and the Camden Town group of painters. Walter Sickert produced a sequence of paintings about the Camden Town murder, which was became quite a famous case, which happened in 1907 when an occasional prostitute called Emily Dimmock was found murdered in her home. An artist by the name of Robert Wood was accused and tried of the crime, but he was acquitted. So it's a case that remains unsolved. What's an interesting postscript to that is that the crime writer Patricia Cornwall used this sequence of paintings of the Camden Town murder by Walter Sickert to accuse Sickert of being Jack the Ripper. And there's a documentary she made about it. She wrote a book about it, and there's a documentary made about it. Of course, I've discussed this in previous videos. Sickert wasn't Jack the Ripper. This area also down here around Mornington Crescent is associated with the poets Rimbaud and Verlaine, who lived in London, and they lived in a flat down here. I think by all accounts they had a pretty miserable time here. So back just over the road from the tube station, we're going to head along Camden Parkway to find the Dublin Castle. Parkway Delicatessen. Spread Eagle pub here. Not a pub that means anything to me particularly. I do remember having a fine pint of Young's in there, but that's about it. And there it is, the Dublin Castle, one of Camden's most legendary music venues. It's most famous for being the place where the great two-tone band Madness used to do a residency, and that really kind of launched their careers. I think old Suggs is, you know, often found having a pint of Guinness in the Dublin Castle. I think naturally it became associated with lots of other bands as well, the usual kind of characters that were around in the early to mid 80s. Right, 2 more places to go. And just off a Parkway we have the Jewish Museum, which I believe is a relatively new museum, and I've heard really great things about it. They have a really great cultural program there as well, so certainly well worth a visit when they reopen, which I think probably isn't far away. As I reached the end of Parkway, I realised that I completely missed out the Jazz Cafe. How can I miss out the Jazz Cafe? It's unfortunate that that's something that someone will have to tell me that I've forgotten. Well, I've told you I've forgotten it, but by now someone would have already left a comment saying, you forgot the Jazz Cafe. These things happen. Look, I know there's going to be loads of other places, and that's the beauty of Camden Town. And I'm going to include something now that probably many of you wouldn't include in your kind of tour of Camden Town. There you go. So we started our walk right up, not far from Hampstead really, up in Chalk Farm. I'd come down from Gospel Lake Station, and we're going to end our walk here right on the northern periphery of Regent's Park. This is classic North London walk. And our final destination is just up ahead of me here. Technically I think Primrose Hill, but really it's Camden Town, just off of the Parkway, and a place with a really significant part in the story of British music. So we'll conclude our walk today at Cecil Sharp House, home of the English Folk Dance and Song Society. This building I think was built between 1929 and 1930. Of course it's named after Cecil Sharp himself, who is credited really with being responsible for the folk revival of the early 20th century, early years of the 20th century. And he is best known for really for his song collecting, song and folk dance collecting. He travelled around all around the country finding people to tell him their songs, and he would make a note of them and an archive of them and create this enormous archive of English folk song and dance. He even travelled as far away as Appalachia, because he thought that's where he would find an English folk tradition untainted by urbanism. All of that stuff is really quite contestable and a little bit dodgy, but I suppose the legacy that he created is still sort of quite significant and substantial. And this is a really brilliant place. It's a really wonderful place to come for a gig. They've got a fantastic library and archive there. I did some research there quite a few years ago, about 20 years ago, into mummers plays, which I'm still very interested in due to their links to where I grew up. A really beautiful place. Well, thank you for joining me on that tour of Camden Town, skimming across the surface of London's alternative culture. I really look forward to reading the comments below. There's going to be some cracking comments below. There'll probably also be a couple criticising me for my lack of research or something like that. But you can skip those ones if you like and just jump to the ones where people are sharing memories and their knowledge of Camden and its heritage. Well, I mean, what can I say? It's been a great bank holiday Monday. It's very windy, as I'm sure you'll have picked up by now. My ankle is bearing up quite well. I'm starting to feel it a bit. So I'm just going to hobble on through Regent's Park to a station somewhere. I hope you're having a great week, and I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. And actually, like I say, I mean, I really don't have any idea. I had no idea I was going to come to Camden Town until like about 10 o'clock last night.